Okay, this is part 2 of chapter 3, the hormones. So we've looked at the nerves, now we're going to look at the hormones. So within our body, we've got things we need to control like water, ion content, temperature and blood sugar levels, and the hormones help us control those. So hormones are chemicals that coordinate processes within the body. So they help keep things within a certain range, and they're really, really important. Now they're released by glands, okay, which we mentioned in the last part 1. And so when we have that nervous response, remember at the end we had the effector, which could have been a gland or a muscle. And if it's a gland, then we can cause it to release a hormone, and then hormones travel around our body in the blood. So nervous impulses, that message travels in our nerves, hormones travel in the bloodstream. Okay, so both have different transport systems. And what we need to look at in this chapter is we need to look at the menstrual cycle in humans, and we need to look at plant hormones. There's 2 aspects to this chapter. So let's start off by looking at the menstrual cycle, okay? The menstrual cycle is looking at how we are controlling the womb lining, the release of an egg, all to be ready for fertilisation, okay, in order for a baby to grow. So we've got a number of different hormones involved here. 3 you need to be aware of for your GCSE. The first one we need to think about is FSH, or follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, this hormone it is involved in stimulating that follicle. So what we end up with is the follicles turning into eggs, okay, which is really important. Women are born with all the follicles they need for the rest of their life, but they're very small. So once a month, the FSH, the follicle stimulating hormone, stimulates a follicle to mature into an egg, and that happens in the ovary. So you can see here that follicle getting bigger and bigger and bigger. FSH also does another job though. It stimulates the ovaries to make estrogen, okay? And that estrogen does a couple of things. It makes the womb lining get nice and thick, ready for that egg to drop down and be fertilised by sperm and grow into a baby. But it also, really importantly, and this is often forgotten, is it goes back and it inhibits FSH. It switches it off. The reason being, we only want one follicle to turn into an egg once a month. We don't want any more than that, otherwise we end up potentially with more babies. Okay, so it goes and it switches it off, so it can't do this process anymore. Okay, so that all happens up to about day 14, and day 14 is the important day, and it's where luteinizing hormone, or LH, causes the release of that egg. Now that egg is released into the fallopian tube, where it waits for sperm, and if it's fertilised, it will turn into an embryo, roll down into the womb and grow into a baby over 9 months. If, once the egg is released into the fallopian tube, it does not meet any sperm, it will not be fertilised, okay, and it will be shed at the end of a cycle in a period with the womb lining. So that is the menstrual cycle, the 3 main hormones: follicle stimulating hormone, estrogen and luteinizing hormone. You need to know how they work within the menstrual cycle. Okay, a couple of things linked to that then, of how we can use those then to our advantage, is for people who can't get pregnant naturally, okay, they can take something called fertility drugs, and this can help couples conceive where they may have had difficulty. And these drugs contain FSH, so follicle stimulating hormone, and luteinizing hormone. And what they do is they stimulate the eggs to mature inside, and then the eggs are collected from the woman, okay, by a doctor, and they're then used in IVF. So IVF stands for in vitro fertilization. In vitro just means in glass, so it would be fertilizing outside the body. So the eggs are fertilized with sperm, and then they turn into an embryo, and an embryo is then inserted back into the uterus, where the womb lining will be nice and thick, and the baby will then grow over 9 months. Okay. We can also control fertility in a different way using contraceptives. So contraceptives is an oral medication, okay, and it can contain estrogen and progesterone, and they inhibit this egg maturing. So if the egg doesn't mature, okay, there is no egg to fertilise, so the woman can't get pregnant. So that's a way of controlling pregnancy, or preventing pregnancy from happening. Now, as a side note, it might be worth noting that previously contraceptive pills used to contain an awful lot of estrogen, but they made women feel quite unwell. So they now contain a lot less estrogen and a lot more progesterone. It is commented on in your specification, only slightly, but I think it's just worth noting. Right, plant hormones now. We've got here a picture of a seedling growing, okay, so there's a shoot going up and the root coming down. Now, plants respond to light, moisture and gravity, and there's some terms you need to know for that. So phototropism is growth in response to light, and gravitropism is growth in response to gravity. You need to be able to use those two words successfully in your exam paper. So what happens is we have another hormones. We've talked about hormones in the humans, now there's hormones in plants. Hormone is called auxin. And auxin does two different things, whether it's in the root or the shoot, just to be a bit confusing. So auxin settles, as you can see, on the bottom side of this plant. So here you can see the auxin on the bottom here and the auxin on the bottom there. Okay, so we have an unequal distribution, and that's really important to try and use that term. So the auxin in the shoot encourages growth, so it increases growth. So on the outside, this is going to grow much faster, so it's going to speed up and overtake the inside and cause the shoot to go up towards light. But in the root, auxin actually decreases growth, it inhibits it, so it goes much more slowly, allowing this top part, which has no auxin or far less auxin, to go much faster and causes that root to go down, okay, towards moisture, towards gravity. So that's really important. So a plant responds to light, moisture and gravity with the help of a hormone auxin. Okay, so it's an unequal distribution of auxin which causes unequal growth. Okay, very important. And just like we've talked about fertility drugs and contraceptives, how we can use those as drugs, plant hormones are also used, okay, as weed killers and rooting hormones. So if we want to kill weeds, and the rooting hormones, if I took a cutting off a plant I particularly liked and dip it in the rooting hormone, it will encourage roots to grow, and they can plant it up then as a separate plant. Okay, so that's what you need to know about hormones, and that's the second part now of chapter 3.